Good afternoon. Good afternoon. There we go. I am delighted to welcome you to the 17th annual Irma Rosenstein Lecture. My name is Jay Miller. I am the Dean of the College of Social Work, and on behalf of our faculty, staff, and students, I welcome you to the lecture, and I'm certainly excited that you are here. The University of Kentucky College of Social Work promotes community and individual well-being through its rigorous research, teaching, and community engagement. The college is committed to the people and institutions of Kentucky, the nation, and of the world. The college nurtures a diverse academic community characterized by fairness and social justice. The college is fiercely committed to developing outstanding social work professionals and scholars, and leaders who will serve individuals, families, and communities through our innovative and effective practices that are guided by cultural competence, ethical analyses, and are keen on pragmatic understanding of the human condition. Because Irma Rosenstein cared about the next generation of social workers, many of whom are in attendance today, I want to sincerely thank you for your commitment to advancing the Commonwealth and to improving the human condition through your actions and endeavors. I also want to note and welcome our students that are in our satellite campuses at Hazard, Kentucky, and at Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, Texas. We welcome you, and we're glad that you're here with us. This lecture series was founded in 2003 and focuses on at-risk children. Ms. Rosenstein's interest in children is centered on intervention and conditions that contribute to children living in poverty. Past lectures have addressed child development issues and advocating for children's rights. And I wholeheartedly believe that Ms. Rosenstein would have found today's lecture to be the epitome of that vision, and that it would also be very timely, relevant, and just in terms of thinking through the needs of the Commonwealth. The Irma Rosenstein Lecture has been a rich series of rigorous talks with experts in science and law, and the College of Social Work is highly committed to this lecture series because of the needs of children throughout the state. We want to thank the Rosenstein family for their generous gift, specifically Irma and Irv, and having that gift and allowing us to live into this lecture series has been impactful, and we are certainly the better for it. In a few moments, we're going to introduce this year's distinguished speaker. And before I do that, I want to bring to the stage one of our outstanding social work students, Daniel Beasley, who epitomizes the intent of this lecture and certainly the mission, vision, and work that we seek to do in the college. So please join me in welcoming Daniel.
Ms. Irma Rosenstein grew up in New York City and graduated from the University of Pennsylvania with a master's in social work. She always cared deeply about the welfare of children, the most vulnerable among us. A social worker at the University of Kentucky Medical Center, Ms. Rosenstein also taught in the College of Social Work and worked closely with our first dean, Ernest Witt. She recognized early in her career that early intervention was the key to both treatment and prevention for kids in need. Most importantly, Irma Rosenstein brought an ethos of openness and of clarity to community problems. She did not shirk from addressing racism and bigotry. Irma took on the big issues of her day, and her vocal passion for social justice continued as long as she lived. Ms. Rosenstein was a driving force behind the Kentucky Conference on Christians and Jews, now called the Kentucky Conference on Communities and Justice, an organization dedicated to building community and ending bigotry. She hosted one of social work's most prominent leaders, Whitney Young, at a KCCJ dinner when no public places outside of the University of Kentucky were desegregated. Irma came to Lexington over 50 years ago, and we recognize that she changed this community for the better. The entire community is indebted to her and grateful for her courage. The College of Social Work now counts Ms. Rosenstein as one of our Hall of Fame members and as a friend and a colleague. She was one of the college's staunchest supporters, and we feel blessed to have had someone with her integrity and compassion involved in our work. Specifically, we are honored that Irma and Irv Rosenstein have gifted us with an endowment for this prestigious lecture series. This lecture series is something that the college is proud to offer each year to our students, faculty, and the wider community as a very special learning opportunity. It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Blake Jones, who will introduce our guest speaker, Hassan Davis.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's my absolute honor to introduce my friend Hassan. Before I get started, though, a few other people I need to thank. Dr. Geiger, Dr. Leffler, are you here? Dr. Geiger's here, Dr. Leffler's here somewhere. Xana Plum, they were all very instrumental in planning this afternoon. Can you give them a nice hand, please, for doing that? Xana also reminded me to tell you to turn off your cell phones and your watches. I've never had to tell an audience to turn their watches off before, but if you got a watch that makes noise, please turn that down if you would. So I have known Hassan Davis for 30 years, and I have a picture to prove it. Here we are at Berea College. That's me on the left there with the mullet. I'm thinking about bringing that back, but I don't know, probably not. That's Hassan in front of me, and there was something about him that drew me to him that summer in 1989. I knew that he was a special person then. I knew a little bit about the struggles that he had had coming to Berea. We were both first-generation students at Berea, and I think he'll talk about Berea today. Berea certainly changed my life, and I believe it changed Hassan's as well. Let me tell you a little bit about him. As a youth running the streets of Atlanta, Georgia, Hassan barely stayed one step ahead of the law. After an early arrest as a preteen and expulsion from alternative school, Hassan earned his GED and made his first attempt to leave the life he knew for one he could hardly imagine. He moved to Kentucky to attend Berea College. Although Hassan was expelled from Berea College twice, he returned a third time, determined to prove that a history of failure would not be his legacy. With the right attitude and his support, Hassan earned his BA degree from Berea College and his Juris Doctor degree from the University of Kentucky College of Law. For more than 30 years, Hassan has drawn on his own experience of transformative support systems to reinforce his commitment to ensuring that every child has the opportunity to success with the help of caring adults and champions. As a counselor and teaching artist and creative youth development expert, Hassan brings a powerful combination of passion, caring, and leadership to craft a refreshing common sense roadmap to help all youth achieve their dreams, no matter the odds. He's been recognized for his professional and personal efforts serving the needs of youth in education, juvenile justice, social services, and the arts. He is a Rockefeller Foundation Next Generation Leadership Fellow, an inductee into the Council of State Governments Henry Toll Fellowship Program, an Annie E. Casey Children and Family Fellow, and an Education Trust Family Fellow. 2008, Hassan joined the Kentucky Department of Juvenile Justice In 2012, he became Kentucky's 5th Commissioner of Juvenile Justice. During his tenure, he was instrumental in the passing of Senate Bill 200, an advocate and, a sweeping juvenile reform piece of legislation. Currently, Hassan is a youth advocate and an international speaker, inspiring youth and adults, as well as providing TA and training to youth-serving organizations. In the fall of 2016, he published Written Off: How One Man's Journey Through Disability, Poverty, and Delinquency. In 2019, he published his first children's book, The Journey of York, Unsung Hero of the Lewis and Clark Expedition. Hassan lives in Berea, Kentucky, with his wife and 2 sons. Would you please help me welcome my friend Hassan Davis?
Y'all remember that song by Bill Withers, Lean on Me? You know how it goes? Sometimes in our lives, help me out. We all have pain. We all have sorrow. Hands up, come on, you know the song. But if we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. Anyway, see, that was the song on the radio the day I got the news. I was at home by myself, had the radio turned up kind of loud, and I guess I was trying to sing, and the phone rang. Hello, I said. Nobody answered. Hello, I said a bit louder. This voice started screaming, he's dead. He's dead. They killed Baby. And the whole world started spinning me, trying to sit before I fall, this voice echoing through my soul. They killed Baby, and Bill is on the radio singing, call me when you need a friend. See, Baby was my cousin, Cedric, about the same age as my youngest brother, Tony, and he was dead. He was the first of my generation to go out like that. He wasn't the last. He wasn't the youngest. He just got to be the first. Baby was a father at 16, used to run the streets. We all used to run the streets. But he knew how to laugh at himself. And you got to know how to laugh at yourself. You hope to survive those St. Louis streets. So I go home for the funeral. And the boy who killed my cousin is already out of jail. That's when me and mine start talking like it's time to go play. You know, it's time to go play judge. It's time to go play jury. It's time to go play executioner. And that's when it hits me that this is what it's all about. Letting your emotion drive you to the edge of sanity, holding on so tight and so long to the madness, it eats you from the inside. And it builds and it builds and it builds and then blam, you can't help but go off like that gun. And somewhere another baby sits staring at the door that she don't know will never open again. And somewhere another mother sits clearing a phone that she knows will never ring again. And somewhere another family, another community is changed forever again. And that is not how I want to make it to the other side. So I start trying real hard not to let other people push my buttons and make me do things. But sometimes I still get so damn mad I can't see straight. And then that song pops into the back of my head. And sometimes I pick up my phone and I push the little star button and I say, hello, you know I'm talking to the other side. And I say, I miss you, baby. I say, I miss you, Steve-O. Damn, I miss JoJo. See, Joe was only 14 when they shot him in the head. I say, I miss you, and I will never forget you, and thanks for listening, and I wish I could return the favor. But I'll talk to you again real soon, so just keep watching my back. Peace. The whole time, you know, it's that song. It never stops playing in the back of my head. I ride up the road and I'll share your load. If you just call me, call me. Yeah, I remember that song because now that's Bebe's song. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Hassan Davis, and just like you, I am a hope dealer. I believe that every child deserves to be engaged, empowered, provided a clear path to personal greatness in career, in education, in community life. But every day in America, thousands of our children are drained from this robust cradle-to-career pipeline and flushed down this foul school-to-prison pipeline. Every day in America, thousands of our children take their last step away from a schoolhouse, and too often it's their first step toward a jailhouse, and it's unacceptable. My name is Hassan Davis, and for 6 years I had the pleasure of leading the Kentucky Department of Juvenile Justice, 4 years as Commissioner of Operations, 2 years as Commissioner of Agency. With a $100 million annual budget, 1,300 employees operating 36 facilities 24 hours a day, we did our very best to make sure that children who fall down at least found the possibility of getting up. But as dedicated as that team is, systems only do what they're designed to do. And locked doors don't ever produce the kind of adults that we deserve. We had some sweeping legislation that's transformed the way we do our work, but the most powerful work that has to happen takes place before those doors lock. Education is absolutely the key. Lots of data tell us that young people who don't complete that first segment of education, that K-12 education, are immediately set up for failure. Statistics say that a high school dropout is 3.5 times more likely to be arrested than a high school graduate. A high school dropout is 8 times more likely to experience jail or prison than a high school graduate. A dropout is 63 times more likely, I'm going to say that one more time, 63 times more likely than their high school completing college-going peers. Not college completing, just those who attempt, get in and try it, to experience long-term institutionalization. So immediately we understand that there is a correlation. When we think about the work that we do in social services, in justice, in education, they all funnel to the idea that we have to make sure that the least, the lost, and the left behind find champions, find voice, find supports. And we are those people. My name is Hassan Davis, and I usually have this long data set about all the proof that shows how bad it is in juvenile justice when education fails. But the truth is, it's data we all know. It's data that we recycle every year. We do more reports on about how if you are a youth of color, you're more likely, sometimes upwards of 3 times more likely to experience it. If you're a youth in poverty, you're at least 2 times more likely. If you're a youth with disability, and the more of these factors you have, the more likely it is that you are going to experience at some point this justice system. But there are other ways for us to get to it. Now, I think there's supposed to be, let's see here. Is there on the bottom? Technology is not my friend, y'all. So, I'm going to take this jacket off. So if my mama asked y'all, I did wear a jacket today. You know, very recently I've learned the difference between deodorant and antiperspirant. I mean, like in the last 5 minutes, I learned the difference, but you know, I ain't scared. So y'all shouldn't be. So I want to talk about the affective domain. That slide all of a sudden looks very dark to me. The affective domain, Dr. Willie Parker, who was a resident of Lexington, Kentucky, an amazing consultant around diversity and justice. I had the opportunity to work with him for a number of years, and he introduced me to this idea of the affective domain, the feeling house. He always said that we have this conversation about cognitive domains, about cognition, about intellect, how young people have to engage and learn certain things. We never talk about the feeling house, that thing that has to be powerful and strong before the brain can even connect to the world. How do we engage young people who have experienced trauma, drama, and pain in a way that allows them to have their lived experience and to transform that into the courage and the power, the persistence that allows them to move forward? So the idea of the feeling house, this affective domain has really struck me since then. And I spend lots of time looking at it when I do my work in the arts, in justice, across the board, because social and emotional engagement is a powerful piece, and we're going to talk more about that. But I want to share this with you. This is a diagram created by a woman named Dana Swayze from the Minnesota Department of Juvenile Justice. I had a chance to meet her at one of those high-level national justice leader meetings in Aspen, Colorado, and she had this report that talked about the conditions and impact of young people in the system coming from juvenile justice, foster care, all those young people in crisis, and she was able to take this. You're familiar with the adolescent brain science? That the adolescent brain continues to function and develop until about the age of 24 or 25. That's the new science. It's no more that hippie science that everybody used to call it. Now we know it's true. The adolescent brain continues to wire and fire, to recreate itself, to shell off what it doesn't need because it's not using it, to build strong what it is using. That adolescent brain continues to grow and build to the age of 24 or 25. She took that data, along with the data from all the major theories of development, Havinghurst, Kohlberg, Piaget, all those guys that we study, and she was able to track those in what I call the 24-hour life track, right? The adolescent brain development clock. And she was able to track those in a way that showed us quadrant by quadrant the developmental milestones that a young person has to experience in order to successfully matriculate into the next quadrant, moving toward adulthood, successful entry into community. Now, what happens is every time a young person experiences some trauma, some drama, some pain, home insecurity, food insecurity, abuse, mama attacking daddy, somebody on drugs, somebody gets arrested in front of them, every time they experience one of these trauma events, the clock stops. No matter how well we do our work as counselors, as social workers, psychologists, as school systems, and communities, once we get them back on track, they find themselves that much behind their peer group. Make sense? So over the course of a lifetime, a young person might become seconds, then minutes, perhaps hours behind their peer cohort. So when they get into this third quadrant, where they're starting to look like grown people, the developmental process might still be second quadrant or first quadrant. That developmental delay creates frustration. It's often where we see young people who've not been served in the systems they've been in start to act out because they can't do what they see other people doing. They haven't experienced the world like other people around them, and so they lash out, they get angry, they get upset, and they trigger corrections responses. They trigger justice responses to educational challenges, to social justice challenges, to community challenges. And those young people are the ones that start to cycle through our justice system. And the more we lock them up, the further behind they get. You see how this cycle works, right? And so when they get into adulthood, I was working with a reentry program, returning citizens, and one of the folk working with them was frustrated about the fact that every time they work with these grown men, getting them into jobs, getting them into housing, getting them on the track again, they sometimes self-sabotage. They throw temper tantrums, they act like children. They say, I don't understand why they're so childish and so, and I was right there with them for a long time until I finally saw this, and all of a sudden it made perfect sense. If you stifle a person at 16 and you lock them in a box for 20 years, then when they come out and you start that clock, they are way behind. And they still are impacted by the world that they left 16, 20 years ago. And so when we start talking about how we really build systems that bring people back home, it means we have to go back and get it. There's a term called Sankofa. There's a Sankofa bird, which is a mythical bird in South Africa. The idea is to go back and get it. It always has peering backwards over its shoulder to look at what happened before it moves forward. And in our work now, we have to start going back to get it. We can't just assume as we encounter folk that right here is their best place. We got to go back and recover things, draw them back into the world that they deserve. And so I like to share this because it's important for us to understand, have a grounding and a context for the folk that we engage with. The people who may be facing challenges and understand the difference so that we can have some compassion and more empathy as we engage them in being patient with the process of moving them forward. But one of the things that I've found is very useful in drawing people out of this cycle is meaningful engagement. We call it social emotional learning now, but the opportunity to engage meaningfully in your community, artistically and creatively, really does have transformative impact. It's the thing that creates an opportunity for people to learn self-management, to learn how to work with people that are different than them, to build relationship and partnerships with people who don't look like, think like, act like, talk like you. Many of us have these experiences, but some of us don't. But one of the things that we know works for people who have experienced lots of challenges is giving them a chance to regrow their affective domain in a way that allows them to step into communities more powerful, more whole, more possible. And so I just like to talk about social emotional learning because the creative engagement is what saved my life. The arts is the thing that gave me a place when there was no place for me in the world. And so I wanted to really encourage you to really look deep into the social emotional learning work, how important it is across disciplines, how important it is as we engage in young people and adult communities in transforming their present into the possible. And again, just something you can go look at. Now, hope is really the thing I came to talk about. And hope is the seed planted in rocky soil with no knowledge of how deep its roots will grow or how many its fruit will feed, but we must still plant and wait and see. Hope is a future-lying statement, an idea of what could happen tomorrow because we act today. No guarantees, because there are no guarantees. But if I do A, B, and C, the possibility of D happening is increased. And hope is that thing we have to hold and carry ourselves. You have to actually be hopeful if you intend to be working with families and children in distress, because you cannot give what you don't possess. If you don't believe you're there to make a change, if you don't believe you can transform every life you engage with, you will not, because the brain will out. The brain will confirm you and make you true. So if you don't really believe there'll be a difference, you will absolutely make sure subconsciously, at some other level, it won't happen. So if you're going to step into this work, if you're going to step into this life, you have to believe you have a purpose and the ability to do something different, and then you have to act on it. It's not just belief, but it's action that comes next. So my name is Hassan Davis, and before I was Commissioner of Juvenile Justice, I was Vice Chair of the Federal Advisory Committee on Juvenile Justice for the United States and Territories. I served as 3 years as Vice Chair of that federal committee advising the President and the Congress of the United States about issues young people in our nation face and the work we must do to repair those challenges where we find them. Before I was Vice Chair of the Federal Advisory Committee, I was Chair of Kentucky's Advisory Committee on Juvenile Justice for 10 years, advising our governors, the 3 governors, in our legislature about the issues the same way. Before that, I was the director of the Youth Violence Prevention Task Force here for the city of Lexington, Mayor Pam Miller. And that's where I met NCCJ, the National Conference for Communities and Justice, Christians and Jews, when I started, and began leading their Anytown effort to bring diverse young people from across this community, rich and poor, every denomination of Christianity, Jews, Muslims, atheists, into this camp, and we would sit there for a week unlearning so much and giving these young people new tools for how they build across communities the things that we deserve, not just the things we received. And those experiences were amazing to me, but before all of those things, life was different. I mean, I grew up like most kids with lots of possibility. See, I had a father who worked an amazing job at General Motors. I had a mother who cared for us and was attentive and made us feel like we were the most amazing people in the world. I mean, I was a good-looking kid with a butterfly collar and polyester suit. And not everybody can pull that off, right? And so, I was working overtime. When I was 4 years old, I remember vividly my daddy giving me this blue and red jet airplanes for my birthday. Little did I know that years later I'd wind up in Kentucky where blue and red mean fighting things, right? And I remember this picture so well because there was a moment in my life where I felt safe. We lived in a second floor apartment and there was a pool down in the yard. It was an aluminum pool back before we had those safety pools that blow up, Kids lose their lives every year playing in those things. But my daddy said, I'm going to throw you out the window into the pool. And I said, okay, Daddy. Because if he said I could fly, there ain't no way I'm touching the ground. And that's the way it ought to be for a child. But as I got older, things began to change. When I was 6 years old, my sister and I woke in the middle of the night to loud noises, and we jumped out of our bunk beds and ran to the living room. There we saw our father throwing my mother against the walls. He threw her onto the couch and jumped on her chest and began to choke her to death. My older sister Teresa ran for the kitchen, and I followed behind, and she got in there and she grabbed the biggest knife out of the block she could hold. And she turned to me and she handed me the next biggest knife, and we took a deep breath. And at 6 and 7 years old, we had to make a decision. We ran back in that living room screaming at the top of our lungs, "You get your hands off my mama!" Now, what I know about my daddy is that he wasn't the kind of man that got afraid of anything. But maybe he looked at these two babies shaking in front of him and for the first time regretted what they saw in him. And for a second, he loosened that death grip on my mama's neck. She took a deep breath and she dove for the phone. That night, I watched my father get escorted away in handcuffs. Shortly after that, they separated. Separation leads to divorce, and things fall apart. We started moving around from aunt to cousin to friend, sleeping on the floor, on couches, 5 in a bed, wherever we could, as long as we could, till Mama finally got settled, working 2 or 3 jobs at a time to keep us in the house. Around that time, we started going on and off the food stamp rolls. Now, back in the day, we didn't have that cool credit card where you got food stamps. We had a big packet that came in the mail at the end of the month. Had the brown dollar bill food stamp, the green $5 bill food stamp, the purple $10 bill food stamp. So people knew you were one of those families because you bought your food with a coloring book. But we survived because Mama knew how to make it work, make us feel powerful. At the beginning of the month, every morning before school, Mama would tear out a $1 bill food stamp and give each of us a $1 bill food stamp. We go down to the corner store. We buy 5 cents worth of candy, because back in the day, penny candy actually cost a penny, y'all. Believe it or not, 5 pieces of candy. Now, here's the trick. If you go to the corner store, not to the major chains like Kroger, but you go to the corner store and gave them a $1 bill food stamp, they had to give you cash back, not the plastic food stamp coins. So we go to school with 95-cent hard cold cash in our pocket. We call it jingling. And all day we walk around and everybody know I'm buying my own milk at milk break today. I'm buying my own lunch. It only costs 65 cents, but I'm paying for it myself. For a few days every month, we could pretend we were like all the other children whose lives seem to be so amazing. When I was 7 and started the first grade, it became really clear to everybody watching that I was not whatever. My vision was bad. My hearing was bad. I was deaf in one ear. I couldn't sit still in class, and I couldn't stop asking questions. I couldn't stop imagining things that had nothing to do with what the teacher wanted us to talk about. And I couldn't take lines and make letters. I couldn't take letters and make words. I couldn't take words and make sense. And one day that teacher, in all of her frustration, she grabbed me up by the arm and she dragged me across that room to the coat room, the closet where we keep all the stuff nobody needs. When she got me to the coat room, she turned around and said, "This is your class now." And as she left, she closed and locked the door. And that became my place. Every morning she would drag me across that room into that box and say, "This is your place now." And she would lock the door. And I would scream at the walls and I would punch at the coats, but I never told my mother, because my mother was working very hard to keep us alive, and she didn't deserve that. Because besides, why wouldn't this be the place where a broken child whose daddy don't love his mama winds up? Why wouldn't this be the place where a kid who's not sure if he's going to have 3 meals a day next week be? Why wouldn't this be the place where you put a child who's not sure if he's going to be in the same house next month? And I sat there. Now, my mama always taught me, through an amazing example in the world, there are 2 things you can do with any challenge you face. Figure out how you got into that place and figure out what you do to use it. Well, I knew I was here because I was that broken boy nobody wanted to deal with. But how do you use this? I didn't know. So day after day, my teacher would escort me to this room and lock me in. And one day, after screaming at the coach and punching the walls, I looked up, and I don't know why it took me so long, but I realized that the code room is where everybody keep their lunch boxes. And all of a sudden, God's great plan for me was revealed. Like the heavens opened up, right? Because Susie always had the peanut butter and jelly sandwich without the crust. Bobby always had fruit cups. And Jimmy always had Tang instant breakfast drink. Now, some of y'all don't know about Tang because y'all got Capri Sun and juice boxes. But if you had Tang, you had everything. So for a few days, I ate good until Mama started coming to school complaining about their babies coming home hungry. And they came to investigate the mystery of the coat room like a Scooby-Doo episode. And there I was with 8 lunchboxes spread around me like a buffet. And that teacher was so angry. She grabbed that little boy up by the arm and she drug him out of that room, across the class in front of his classmates to that seat right next to her desk. And she sat him down in that place where she could keep an eye on that bad boy who eats other children's food. Now, it was not a compassion, a sense of justice, a possibility that she did this. It was completely out of desperation. But what she did, completely accidentally, she restarted the clock. She created a possibility. And sometimes all we need is just a little bit of daylight. And we get to run with it. And that became my story. Year after year, moving from school to school. We moved from St. Louis to Atlanta. We lived in 13 different homes before I was in the 8th grade. Some of those were 1-month rentals where somebody wake you up in the middle of the night and say, "Get up, get your stuff, you got to go. You'll be in a new school tomorrow." Went to 5 different elementary schools before I completed the 7th grade. When I was 11 years old, I got my first arrest. Long, drawn-out thing I'm not going to get into detail about, but at the end of the day, I'm at the police station with my boys, and we having this drama with the cops for all day, and mamas started to show up. And they was all mamas, and they all came in kind of sideways. You know how mamas get it sometimes. I had to take 3 buses to get here. I'm going to lose my job because you got 2 more kids to raise. I'm just going to let them lock you up. All that stuff was going on. And what I understand now as a professional in this work is families in crisis only have a few ways that they can react to challenge. Anger, frustration, that's how they challenge it because the world is taking everything else from them. And what I've learned as a professional is that when we have those titles behind our name, those letters, too often we get into these confrontations with parents who are righteously confused and concerned. And we say things like, "Man, if you're going to talk to me like that, then we're not going to have a conversation. I work too hard for these letters behind my name for you to be talking to me like that and calling me those names." But we know it's Christ is talking. We've been trained to see that it's Christ is talking, but we still have that out because what that indignation covers is the fear and the concern and the embarrassment and the truth that they understand that if a system like this gets your baby, it ain't going to just let it go. But it all comes out as rage. And so as they all came in like that, all these other mamas, I realized that when my mama showed up, I was going to just be dead. I might just ask them to lock me up. So I was working on this speech I was going to go. That was like, maybe if I was like totally out of the box, she like wouldn't kill me, right? And so I was like, You don't know what it is to be a black man in the bad world, so back up off me, lady, because I'm going to do what I got to do. I was working on something like that, right, when she showed up. And she was calm. I was like, oh, snap. And, she did the paperwork, and she thanked the officer. I was like, oh, man. Then I was like, okay. You don't go off in the police station because they might arrest you. When we get outside, I don't know what we're going to do. When I get outside, I do what I call the near, far, near walk. You know what that is? When you walk close enough to somebody, people know you with them, but not close enough for them to reach you if they start to swing all of a sudden. The near, far, near walk. So I'm walking and watch her at the corner of my eye in case she jumped, and she's still cool. So I'm okay. Well, if you go off in the police station parking lot, they may call social services, get in your business, open up a case. I don't know what we're going to do when you get in the car. We got in the car. Mama had to borrow a car to come get me. I got in the car, sat down, no seatbelt on, hand on the doorknob because I thought I was going to have to get out quick. And I'm just waiting for her to go off on me. And we start to drive. And we drive. And we drive. I'm about to pass out holding all this in, waiting to justify my bad, stupid choices. And I finally got the courage to look at her. And she's just crying. These huge, silent tears. And she looks down at me and she says, baby, if you could see what I see every time that I look at you, you would know how great you already were. And I was like, what? That made no sense considering the data that had been coming to her for not just right now, for years. And I thought her ability to look at me and say that with a straight face either means that she is a straight up con or I need to look harder. So I filed it away. I went before the judge and wound up on probation and all that drama. But I got back on the path. The next year, we had what I call the most amazing Christmas. Have you ever had one of those Christmas holidays so amazing it's like stamped in your brain? We had one of those. The tree was so tall that it bent over on the ceiling. We had lights, popcorn, candy strung around the tree. We had giant robots and puzzles and Monopoly games. It was amazing. Now, why it was amazing is because that's not how Christmas was for the last few years. For the last few years, we couldn't afford a tree. So Mama would take the Christmas lights and she would pin them on the wall in the shape of a tree. And we would make popcorn and string it. We'd make gifts for each other because we couldn't buy anything. And she made it seem like that's what rich people did because they had everything. So they made stuff. It was personal. So we thought we were just doing what rich people do. Then we'd go downtown to the annual Hosea Williams Christmas party for poor children at the Civic Center in Atlanta, Georgia. Hosea Williams was a contemporary of Dr. Martin Luther King, marched with him in the SCLC, and he started this charity where they would feed all the poor children in the city at the holidays. When we would go down there to this ballroom, there was nothing but tables as far as you could see. And the volunteer would give us a styrofoam compartmentalized tray, those trays like a school tray. They say you can go up and down as many aisles as you want, as many times as you can, as much as you'd like. And we would go and we would eat and eat and eat until we couldn't eat anymore. And after we were so full we could hardly walk, they would lead us on the stage and sit us in Santa Claus's lap and take a Polaroid. And they handed us that Polaroid picture. And as we left the stage, a volunteer would give us a gift wrap box that said boy 5 to 7 or girl 9 to 12. And we would take those boxes home and put them under the tree with the ones we made for each other. And that was Christmas. So this Christmas when I was 12, my mother and stepfather both working, life seemed like one of those things we saw on TV. A few days after Christmas, we started back school. One afternoon, somebody's banging on my back door. My house is on fire. My house is on fire. So I grabbed my daddy's fire extinguisher and run 3 doors down. My neighbor was making dinner for her husband who works the 3rd shift. Baby started crying. She went to check on her. A few seconds, she was gone. That bacon grease caught fire in the pan. That bacon grease fire went straight into the cabinet above the stove. Went straight from the cabinet to the walls, and straight from the walls to the ceiling. Hit all that insulation. And because somebody in their brilliant mind decided that in the low rent housing you put poor people in, you didn't need to put firewalls between the units because that's just a waste of good taxpayers' money. So when that fire hit that insulation in the ceiling, 10 families lost everything they owned that night. By the end of the night, I was homeless again. But early the next morning, I was walking to school in somebody else's shoes again. And I'd have to swallow down that pain that comes when somebody goes, I remember that sweater. That's the sweater my grandmama gave me. You'd have to find a way to say thank you because you were thankful, but it still hurt to live in other people's grace. And because Mama didn't want me in my 6th elementary school, she kept me in that school even though the family had to move all the way back into the town. And so I began a ritual of waking up at 5 o'clock every morning, take a bus into downtown Atlanta, and the second bus back out, and walking the last quarter mile to school to finish my 7th grade school year. And I finished that school year, and Mama enrolled me in an alternative school. She knew that the public system had very specific plans for boys like me, and she couldn't afford to risk that. Now, this alternative school was a true alternative school. It's not the place we send children's dreams to die like we see most often today. This was a place of true differentiated learning. The administrator, Dr. Lorraine Wilson, was the most amazing person I'd ever met. She was legally blind. She could read, she could see from about this far. And I walked in her office once, she was reading a book like this and another book in Braille at the same time, y'all. Blew my mind. But she was amazing because she made me feel like I had a place to belong. I got in trouble once. No. I got in trouble often. But this one time that I got in trouble, I always have to get that right. This one time I got in trouble, I got sent to her office. And I sat there waiting for her to come in. And, you know, there'd been a lot of drama. And I'd been, you know, so it was only a matter of time. So I was sitting there waiting for her, you know, kind of bouncing like I do. And she came in, and she's legally blind. She walks very intentionally. And everything she has to know where everything is. And she came in, and she slowly got to her seat. And she sat there right across from me. And she just started looking at me without blinking. It really made me nervous. And then she said, I know who you are. And I was like, oh, here we go. I've heard this before. And she said, and I think that you can accomplish anything you set your mind to, and all you could do is prove me wrong. So I sat there for a second because that didn't make no sense. Then I remember she was legally blind, so I did the eyeball check. And she didn't move her eyes, so I finally said, you know that it's Hassan, right, Lorraine? And she sat there for a few seconds, and then she said, I know who you are. And I think that you can accomplish anything you set your mind to, and all you can do, Hassan, is make me a fool for believing such things about you. And for the first time in my educational career, someone told me that I was great and dared me to sacrifice great for something less fulfilling. It was amazing school Horizons was, and all the things I talked about, social emotional learning and affective, but she made those things live. I'd be in her class, and she'd all of a sudden say, Hassan, do you think you want to go outside and run around the school as fast as you can? And I was like, what? Yeah, I think I do. I mean, I didn't think so till you said it, but yes, that's exactly what I want to do. And she said, okay, you just go when you run. And I would run around that school 3 or 4 times as hard as I could till I could hardly breathe. And I would walk back into that room, and something amazing would happen. Y'all ever seen those Claritin commercials, allergy commercials, where everything's like fuzzy, oh, I've got stuffy nose, and then like they take the medicine, and then like they peel back the corner like a film, and everything's really sharp. The first time I saw that commercial, I turned to my wife and said, that's it. And she was like, what are you talking about? I said, no, that's it. That's what happens to me when I can burn off enough energy for my brain to slow down for the rest of the world. The whole world gets sharp edges. And sitting in that class with Dr. Lorraine Wilson for about the next 45 minutes, everything made sense. I could connect and I could raise my hand and I could be right in the conversation. So she taught me this skill. She let me understand that my body was different, that my brain was different, and in order for me to be successful, I had to be willing to do things. She helped me figure out I sit in her math class and I'd be totally frustrated because she called me a mental math. At first I thought that was a bad thing. She said, no, you do mental math. Because I can look at an equation up to like pre-calculus and I can give you the answer and it's mostly right. It used to be, I can't do it at all now. But then she would say, Hassan, math is not about the answer. It's about the process. Y'all heard this too, right? So it's not. And I was like, well, Lorraine, why you keep asking me for the answer to it? You know? And she never had a response to that. But it frustrated me because I would sit in class every day and I would feel like I was right, but then she would say no because I could not do anything in between. So one day a week, she would make everybody clear their desk. And she would start to call out the numbers. 5 times 2 plus 6 divided by 2 plus 7. Answer, boom, 15. Every time she stopped, I had the answer. Every time she stopped, I knew better than anybody else. One day a week, I got to be math god of the universe. And it made me able to sit 4 days a week, frustrated, but not deterred. Because I'd be just like, y'all wait till Wednesday. On Wednesday, I got everybody. Again, learning how to manage to figure out what you were good at so that you can understand that you still belong even though you belong differently. These were the gifts that she gave me. Now, the hard part is after being in alternative school for 5 years, I lived in the school the last 3 years. She called me to that same office one day. I just turned 18, December, right before the end of classes for the holidays. And she sat me in that same chair, and she considered me for a while, and then she said, Hassan, it looks as if you have failed the class that you need for graduation, and it won't be possible for you to make it up before the end of the year. So I'm going to have to ask you to leave. So my whole world broke. The one place where I finally found strength and power and voice, and I was being put out of another place. So I went back home. I went back to the life I knew, to the place I understood, where I was that big guy in the corner, where everybody knew if I was out there talking, everybody was in trouble. That's not who I wanted to be, but apparently the world told me that's all you get. Now, one of the things I want to tell you about my brothers, Sean, Derek, and Tony, my best friends in the world, that these are 3 of the most amazing people I've ever met in my whole life. I've shook hands with President Barack Obama. I've testified before Congress under oath. I've sat in Fortune 500 boardrooms talking about the world and what has to happen, and still these 3, amazing. As a young man, being the oldest, I made a decision early on that in order for them to live in the world, I might have to sacrifice myself, and I was good with that. Because everything about my life since I was born has been leading me toward one track. I realized very early there was going to be a long, difficult life for me, but I figured if I could block for these guys, the whole world would see something amazing, and I could do that. And that's why I kept fighting, because I wanted them to see. My brother Sean, it's my stepbrother. He came to live with us when he was 8 years old. Cigarette burns up and down his arms and chest, bruises all over his back, gifts from his mama's friends. We shared a room for 8 years, and every day for 8 years we fought because the lesson he learns is that might makes right, and you don't tell me unless you can make me. That's the lesson broken children learn. I came home from alternative school once to visit, and Sean was sitting in the corner of the room talking real low. So I was like, yo, Kaz, what are you doing? Kaz, Casanova, that was his tag on the street. I said, yo, Kaz, what are you doing? He said, yo, man, I'm talking to my girl. And you got to talk with her, your name is Casanova, right? I was like, how you talking to a girl with wires tied around your head, bro? So I took it from hello. I said, hello, somebody answered. Oh, snap, dude. I said, where'd you get this? He was like, man, you remember that old Walkman? Y'all remember Walkmans? Some of y'all, like, I seen it in a TV show once. Walkman, before we had iPhones, before we had CDs, we had cassettes. If you had a Walkman and like 20 batteries, you could play your favorite music for like half a day, right? He sent me the old Walkman. I says, yeah. He said, I took that old Walkman, and I took the broken telephone. I took him apart, and I just started messing with him until I got some static. I just kept messing with him until I got a dial tone. And I called my girl. I said, wait, you made this? He was, yeah. I was just, no. You made this. He was like, yeah. No. You made, I wasn't sure if you understood the question, right? You made this. He says, yes, I'm going to get that. My baby brother built a telephone headset, y'all. So he could chill in the corner and talk to his girl. This was 1983. We didn't have no telephone headsets. Still had that old telephone in the kitchen. You have to call the operator for assistance, but he built a telephone headset. I said, Sean, man, you could be one of those electric guys. That's all I had, but it seemed pretty cool. He just started laughing. He said, no, man. This is what I do when we're hanging out at the house. Ain't nobody gonna let me do this in the real world. We don't get to be great in the real world. That was the voice. We don't get to be great in the real world. That's other people's dreams, other people's lives. That's the day I realized I might lose my brother before he got to be great in the world. My brother Sean and my brother Derek. Derek's in the middle of that top picture. He's my foster brother. Came to live with us. We were teenagers. We were best friends. We kept each other alive, and his family fell apart completely. My mom always had room for more. But he was amazing. He could talk to anybody, create friends, build relationships. He was brilliant. My brother Tony, prettiest boy you ever seen. Everybody loved him. Not they boyfriends didn't like him as much as the girls did, but you know, that's what he had his big brothers for. But these three were amazing. The thing I can tell you is that amazing ain't enough. Because when the world continues to tell you and show you you don't have value, eventually it becomes your truth. My brother Sean is doing 57 years now. Derek is doing life with a minimum 25. He's 24 in. And we're hopeful, since Florida started to change its laws, that maybe there's a range in there where they might see daylight before death. But these two brilliant men, my younger brother Tony, he struggles. But these two men locked away from the world, and all their gifts are gone because we didn't have the tools or maybe the commitment to see them not just as they're present, but are possible. And so when I got expelled and went home and we hit the streets, it was the thing that I hated most. And I said I was going to go to college. Now, with a 1.67 GPA, a juvenile criminal record, ADHD, dyslexia, after going to 5 different schools and living in 13 homes, I was like, yeah, let's do college. Dr. Lorraine Wilson actually told my mother about this school in Kentucky where you have to be poor to go there. It's a work-study college. My Horizons was a work-study high school. You have to work, go through there, and if you're poor, they accept you, they pay everything, all my criteria, because I had nothing. So I applied to Berea College in Kentucky. I'd never been there before, never seen it, but I was going to go there because it was my place. About a week before classes start, I didn't get my acceptance letter. So I called Berea College, collect. I don't know if y'all remember. Collect is when you have to call somebody and you can't afford to call, so you ask the operator to charge them for the call. So I called collect. And the operator answered, said, collect call from Hassan Davis. And the operator of the college said, okay, we'll accept it. I was like, oh, snap, didn't expect that. And she was like, Berea College, how can I help you? I said, well, my name is Hassan Davis from Atlanta. I'm trying to reach the director of admissions. You're going to go big, right? The director of admissions. And she said, please. So I was like, oh, snap, wait a minute, you know? And the next voice I heard was the director of admissions, Berea College, John Cook, Berea College Admissions. How can I help you? I was like, Mr. Cook, my name is Hassan Davis. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I applied to come to Berea College, and classes start next week, and I haven't got my acceptance letter yet, so I'm just calling to see where it is. Now, all of you brilliant people know that if you don't receive an acceptance letter the week before classes start, there's a good reason. I ain't have no clue, so I called collect. So Mr. Cook was nice enough. He, took a deep breath and like, okay, let me go find your file. And he was drinking through the garbage can. Where we throw that thing? And he got back on the phone a few minutes later, and he says, Mr. Davis, you have to understand that Berea College is one of the most competitive application processes in the country. Thousands of applications, hundreds of positions. I've only got a couple slots left in the freshman class that I'm trying to fill, and I've got very promising applications from the young students in West Virginia. I don't think this is going to work out for you. And I said, well, sir, I need to know for sure. I don't think so. Don't take I don't think so for an answer, right? And he said, okay, I'll call you back and confirm that. About an hour later, the phone rings, and it's Mr. Cook, and he has this sound to his voice like, I can't believe I'm about to say this out loud. He says, okay, Mr. Davis, I think we're going to give you a chance. I imagine somebody behind him going, just like we rehearsed it, John. But he said, we're going to give you a chance. And all of a sudden, I became a college student. So we packed up all my stuff, and we jumped in the Gremlin, and we drove all the way up to Berea. The car broke down in Tennessee. I was like, we should go home, Maybe God just telling us. We got to Berea late. They only had 2 stoplights in town. One was just a yellow flashing light. I was like, that's caution. We should just leave. It was about midnight we got there. Found the student center. I walk in, and the student's locking up. And I'm like, hey, I'm Hassan. I'm a new student. And she was like, orientation was over like 5 hours ago. I'm like, you're not very helpful, But she was like, oh, so she calls around, and finally they say, okay, so go around campus, and they send me to a dorm, and somebody will be there. And I get there, and the head resident of the dorm comes out and says, well, come on in. We don't have any more rooms left, but we've got some beds set up in the lobby, and we'll just get you in the bed. Kids drop out the first week. Oh, that's really good to hear. Thank you. I wound up there in this lobby with 6 other guys that must have got there just before me. My mama turned around and she gave me the last $20 in her purse, and she said, okay, baby, it's time to decide who's right about you and who's wrong, but you have to make a choice now. And she left me in this place where people didn't look like, think like, act like, talk like me, to figure out if I could be more. Now, the thing you learn growing up in survival mode is that you don't tell people your weaknesses because they might use it against you. So I couldn't go and tell somebody that I couldn't read like other kids and that I didn't sleep like other kids and that my processing was completely off because I didn't want anybody having anything they could use against me. So I would wait for my roommate to go to sleep every night. And once I was sure he would sleep, I would turn my lamp on and I would dig up under all my clothes and pull out my penmanship pad paper. My penmanship pad I've been using since I was in elementary school. Red line, blue line, red line. And I would get it out and I would practice my handwriting, making sure he couldn't see me. And after I did that for an hour, I would get my books out and figure out which one that I could look at and spend the next 3 hours processing maybe 5 or 6 pages over and over again so I could absorb enough of that in class I could make an intuitive leap to prove that I deserved to be there. I was in 0 level English and math the entire first year. 0 level. Didn't even count for high school credit. And every one of those circumstances was an indication that I didn't deserve and didn't belong. That people like me don't get to be there. But my mama told me I could. Dr. Lorraine Wilson told me that I could be great. And I counted on them. I actually made it 3 semesters before it finally caught up with me, and I couldn't fake it fast enough to stay on top. And I got expelled from Berea College. Went back home, hit the streets, and realized that that wasn't going to be my place. And if I stayed long, I would never get out. I wrote a letter to my mother from Fort Knox, Kentucky. Dear Mama, I'm joining the Army. I'll see you when these people let me out. And there I was. I finished my training, went through advanced training. I came out over the Christmas break. I went back to Berea College, and I went to the dean of students. And I knocked on his door and said, hey, my name is Hassan Davis. I used to go to school here, and I'm trying to get back in. He was like, well, Mr. Davis, that's not going to work for you right now. I was like, oh, okay. I'll see you tomorrow. And the next day I came up, I was knocking on the door. Hey, Dean Hager, my name is Hassan Davis, and I used to go to school. He said, well, you were here yesterday, right? I said, yes, sir, I was. So, well, you wanted to get back in school? That's right. He said, I told you you couldn't, right? You told me yes, you did. He said, well, you still can't get back in. I said, oh, okay. I'll see you tomorrow. And the next day I showed up and said, hey, Dean Hager. He said, what are you doing, Mr. Davis? I said, well, you know, sir, this is really the only thing on my to-do list. So as soon as we get to it, the quicker you can go do whatever else you do during the day. And he told me, no, you can't get back in. And then I told him that he was a liar. Well, I told him he was a liar because when I got expelled, I had to go see him, and he sat me down and said, you know, making this transition, first-generation college student coming from all those challenges that our students come from, sometimes you can't make it the first time, but you have lots of potential, Hassan. I think if you take some time off and get yourself together, when you're ready to come back, you will be a good student, and we'll be here for you. Now, what I understand is that probably is the speech that every good administrator gives to every young person in crisis, embarrassed and failing. And very rarely does one of those young people show back up at the door because we don't want to go back to the point of our greatest disappointment, the place where we had our greatest failure. We would rather just change the story and be something else. But I went back because this was my only ride out. When I called him on that and told him what he had said, he said, you know, I remember that, so I'm going to go talk to the committee and you should come back tomorrow. I mean, I was already coming back tomorrow, right? So he said, you know, you come back and when I'll see what I can do. And I came back and said, okay, we got you back on academic probation, labor probation, and social probation, but you're going to get back in. I was like, cool, I can handle that. Got back into school, ready, still couldn't tell anybody what I needed, though. But I told every professor, you tell me what I need to get a D+ in this class. Yeah, I'm not going high. I need to maintain. If I'm not getting at least a D+, you let me know, and we'll figure it out. Went through the semester, last day of class, professor called me to his office. He said, you know, I spent 30 minutes on each of the papers, the final papers of the student in our class. I saved yours for last, and I took it to the library. I checked out all the sources that you cited, and I spent 4 hours combing through it till I found 2 sentences that are close enough to original text that I feel comfortable charging you with the academic crime of plagiarism. He looked me in my face and told me those words. And in my head, all I could hear was my brother. We don't get to be great in the real world. Nobody's going to let us be great. And this was probably the most violent attack I'd ever experienced. And I only have one way to deal with attacks. And I'm sitting here trying to hold myself in check, trying to figure out what this man is and what's going on in his head. And he tells me that my thesis, my opening statement was so good that he couldn't convince himself that I wrote it. And so we had to investigate deeper because remember what I told you first? That what we believe in our head and heart will become our truth because we will do everything in our power to be truth. And if you don't believe that you can make somebody greater, you won't. If you believe the person in front of you doesn't deserve to be with you, you will ensure that truth. And he sat me down and explained it to me. And I controlled myself and I said, well, what's to stop me from just taking this paper and leaving? I can fail your class for not turning the paper in. And that's when he realized that I was between him and the door and there was a bar on his window. And I took a deep breath and I got a hold of myself and I threw the paper down and said, you do what you got to do. You can't stop me. It was all bravado, but I was shaken to the core. And all I could hear was my brother Sean's voice echoing through my head. My list changed. Pack your things, call your boys, go home. Do what you got to do. Take what you got to take. Handle what you got to handle. Somebody bigger, better, faster, strong takes it. Lesson learned. I've got it. I walk across campus to my mailbox. We call it the CPO, Blake, remember? We go back to my college post office by my CPO box. I open it up. There's a paperback envelope inside. In that envelope is a bandana wrapped in plastic. My tag was bandanas. I always had cool ones. The bandana had a Japanese rising sun and Japanese characters on each side. Written in marker on the outside of the package were these words: inevitable victory for Hassan with love, Mom. Inevitable victory for Hassan with love, Mom. I've been lying to my mama for the last month, telling her everything was good because she don't deserve to hear no more bad news from me. But somehow she got that mama sense, and she sent this 3 weeks ago so it'd get to me in time. And I sit on the wall with my expulsion papers and all this rage and this message from my mama. This voice echoing through my soul, it's time for you to decide who's right about you and who's wrong, baby, but you have to make a choice. So I said, okay, maybe I'm not done. I went and apologized to Dean Hager and thanked him for his commitment, and I left and I said I'd be back, and they were like, oh, you ain't coming back. And a year later, I came back. I moved to Richmond and worked construction for a year because I couldn't go back home again. That wasn't going to be 2 times out. But I came back and I said, I want to go back to school. They said, no. But I said, let me talk to the committee. 5 minutes. They said, we never do that. It's just 5 minutes. They said, okay. And I went to them and said, nobody's going to look at a place like this. They gave a guy like me 3 chances and say, what a terrible place that is. But what if I can do this? What if I get the right help and I do this? It proves everything about you and everything I believe about me. I just need you to loan me $3,000. You're going to go, right? And they were like, are you serious? Because, they pay everything. Anyway, I said, I need $3,000. There's this new thing called a Mac. And it has something called Microsoft Write 1.1 with spell check. I'm not quite sure what that is, but I'm pretty sure if I had something with spell check, I could finally get what's in here out, and you could see it. And you can decide if it's worth anything. And just like Mr. Cook all those years ago, against all the odds and reasoning in the world, they said, okay, we're going to loan you the money, bring you back into school. You've been academic probation, labor probation, social probation, convocation probation, double secret probation. And if anything happens, you have to promise not to come and talk to us anymore. And I thought that was a fair caveat. I was like, that's fair. Okay, that's good. And so I got my computer, big 25-pound personal computer. I lugged it across campus in my classrooms. I made the dean's list the first semester back. After I cleared the dean's list, got off probation, I started going for it. I was elected homecoming king. I was voted president of the student body. I got to lead in the school place like one of those Saturday morning specials, y'all. I became a cheerleader. I was like the scariest cheerleader in the conference, right? But I was a cheerleader, y'all, but yeah, and I was trying all these things that I wasn't supposed to try because finally I hit my stride. I realized I could be anything if I was brave enough to imagine and try. Don't have to do but try. At graduation, being the president of the student body, I gave the opening welcome and prayer. I took the podium and looked up just in time to see the usher escort my mama down the aisle. And for the first time in my life, I finally got a glimpse at the man she'd been looking at. That's what hope looks like, y'all. The ability to imagine beyond present the possible. And then the courage to act to create that truth. That's the gift we all have. The power we all have. Now, I got 85 more slides. But I don't think I'm going to get through them, so I'm just going to use a couple. I also do living history. I have 3 one-man shows that I tour nationally, telling the story of African Americans and American history. One of the most important things that I believe I do, stories of A.A. Burley, who escaped slavery to become a soldier during the Civil War and then went to Berea to become his first African American graduate. People like York, the only black member of the Lewis and Clark expedition. How many of y'all know there was a black member of the Lewis and Clark expedition? That's my point. He was there from day one to day done, and most folk don't know. So during the bicentennial of Lewis and Clark, the Department of Interior and National Parks picked me up to be York for the nation. Make sure his story was right there with the folk we already know. Got a chance to travel all over the country, making sure that that voice was there and people understood that he was present. We were present. It was an amazing experience. So, when I was in the 3rd grade, I got my first history book. And the teacher said, this is the place where all of our amazing stories live. And I tore through that book. I was like, yes, all right, finally, it's about time. And I'm going page after page and chapter after chapter, looking for the story of me. And chapter 1, chapter 7, chapter, no, not me. I finally get to this chapter on American slavery. and has a picture right at the front of this old man stooped over, old black man with scars. You've probably seen it with scars on his back from repeated rippings. And the caption just simply said, "The American Negro, slave, period." It was a clear statement. It was a statement that almost ejected me from the system, because at 9 years old, I realized that this wasn't my story. And if this was the only story I had, then so I started doing research, and my mama started giving me stories, and that's what fed me through all the difficult times, knowing that there were other stories of me in the place of us, to make me believe that I had a right to be, and a right to imagine, a right to dream greater. And that affirmation is what young people need. We deserve, all of us, to see our own faces reflected in the stories of our history, to imagine our own experience, because we have been there. All of us are part of this. It's important as you move through the world, wherever you go, that you have the ability to seek out the stories that pertain to the people you serve, to make sure they know that you know why they are there and why you ought to be with them, because we are all part of this. This is an important part of what I do now. My own mission is to share those stories. Now, people ask me all the time, they say, well, how do you go from juvenile delinquent to Juris Doctor? How do you go from banging on the streets of Atlanta to testifying before Congress? How do you go from expelled from every school you ever attended to graduating from the UK College of Law? And I can't even get into that story because it's a long story, but I got expelled from UK Law School 3 times. I never missed a day of class. I had advocates and champions there who saw the need that I had because I finally asked for it. And there were some who thought people like me didn't belong there, just like my professor at Berea, and thought that it was their job to call me because I wasn't UK law material. But there were folk who believed that if you accept somebody, then you have a responsibility to give them what they need, not just what you think they ought to have. And the college finally gave me the things that I needed and gave me a chance to step out into the world. I had a young man once I was working with. He wasn't 18 yet, but he just did 5 years in prison for murder because he got caught up in somebody else's life. And that's what happens very often. I tell young people, when you're in this place, people use you for their benefit. They try to tell you that it's your best life, but it's because they like your life like that. But he asked me one, he said, "Mr. D, you remember your worst day?" I was like, "Yeah, I was born in D.C." He said, No. Your worst day. The day you realized your life had value, possibility. And I said, "Well, yeah. I hadn't thought about it, but I don't talk about it, but yeah, I did." I used to go home every once in a while. And I go home once with my Berea College cheerleading jacket on. Can you imagine this guy stepping in with a Berea College cheerleading jacket on? My brother's like, "Oh, hell no. You can't go outside wearing that jacket, bro. We're going to be fighting all night." So I had to give my jacket to my baby sister, which I thought was fair. We're going to go out to this club. This one time I come home, and one of the things that I had to start doing after I wore that jacket home is every time I came home to visit, I'd have to fight my brothers. Full contact, no hose barred. As long as they were swinging, I had to stay standing. If I could stay standing, we were good. The day I couldn't, I stayed home with Mama. Sean said I become an egghead college boy, and they had to be sure that if we get into something, I was ready to do what I had to do. So I go home once, and we do our dance, and I'm ready to go out, and we're going to go out to this club because my stepfather, my father, that's him up there. He was a reggae singer. This is Dr. Lorraine Wilson, and that's my mama Alice. But my father was a reggae singer. I hadn't heard the band because I've been gone for so long, so we were going to go to the club and check them out. The whole family was going to be there, and so me, Derek, and Sean are riding around the city looking for the club. We're in this old Chevy S10 pickup truck, black, red stripe, no grill, 3 brothers rolling through the hood. We can't find this club, so we stopped into a gas station parking lot to think about it. Looking back on it, we could have went inside and got directions, but we 3 guys in the pickup truck didn't even occur to us. So we sitting there trying to figure out where the club is, and the whole truck starts bumping. This furious beast starts building and rolling through the parking lot a few seconds later, bass all the way up to 20. This old hoop The 4-door, tinted windows sitting low. He glides to a stop in front of the store, and all 4 doors pop open. Guys start rolling out all 4 doors. These brothers look around like they own everything they can see, and they look over at us. And Derek's like, you see what those guys are looking at us, man? See, Derek was driving, Sean was in the middle, and I was at the door. I was like, no, dude, I'm just trying to figure out where the club is. But Derek saw something. Because you always see something when you're looking for it. So he throws the truck in first, and he pulls in right behind her, and he blocks. And as soon as we stop, they all start rolling back out the store. I'm like, cool. I rolled down the window because I talk to everybody. I'm everybody's friend at Berea. I'm like, hey, guys, we're trying to find this club. Maybe y'all can come help us out. Come hang out if you want to. I'll buy you a drink. And they lose their mind. And they go off, and my whole brain is like, dude, you have not switched heads yet. My brother Sean called me egghead college boy, come home to play hard, and I haven't switched over. So Derek starts going back and forth with him. Derek is a verbal gymnast. He has the ability to throw a phrase at you, and it takes you a few seconds to stick. But what you just call it takes you a while to figure out he just insulted you. He was good. And so they're going back and forth, giving as good as they get. And finally, Derek is tired of all this, so he reaches us and taps the 38 that he keeps on the dashboard just to let him know, if you're looking for stupid, we will be here when you show up. Instead of doing what a rational person does when confronted with deadly force, they look at the 38, look back at us, and they escalate. You must be out of your mind. They use different words, but that's what they say. You must be out of your mind. I think we're afraid of a little 38. And they started to escalate, and it's going back and forth. And I realized sitting here in this, we had us an old bench seat, so it's just a little Chevy. No back seat, just us in this one row. And Sean is super quiet, and that makes me nervous because Sean's only got 2 gears. He got neutral, he got overdrive. Either everything's cool or it's time for you to be gone. And I know it's only a matter of time, so I'm like, yo, D, let's drive. Man, we're just trying to find this club. You can help us out. Come hang out. I'll buy you a drink because I'm everybody's friend up in college. I talk to everybody, so I can do this. But it's not going anywhere. And finally, I can feel Sean's body start. We used to call it humming. His whole body would start to vibrate. And I knew it was about that time, and I'm trying my best to get us out of there. And finally, Sean is done. You ever seen an old Chevy S10? It doesn't have a back cargo seat, but the passenger seat tips. And that's where you keep your jack and your stuff for spare tires. But behind me is a Uzi machine gun. And so he jabs his arm behind, starts pushing me forward because he is done with this. So I'm pushing back on the seat saying, no, Sean, drive direct. I'm just trying to find this club. I'm trying to keep all the balls in the air, but I'm losing control really quick. And I'm realizing that I'm not in the right head, and I can't get my head around this idea. And so I'm trying to get Sean to push back on the seat, and he is frustrated, he's angry. And I'm trying to become the big brother that shared a room with him for 8 years and fought him every day because he said might makes right. But I'm just that egghead college boy who comes to play hard sometimes now. And he ain't buying it. As I'm focused on Sean, this guy screaming in my ear says, I got something for that 38 of yours, punk. I hear the back door open. In that quick second, I realized that if that was my car, there'd be a shotgun on that floor. And the whole time I'm thinking, I don't want Mama to come down and see her boys behind no plate glass tonight. And I say, there ain't no way in hell my mama coming down to claim no bodies. So I took a deep breath, and I leaned up on the seat. My brother pulled the Uzi machine gun out. Now, if you've never heard the charging handle of an Uzi chamber, that first round makes a very distinct sound when it locks. Everybody starts diving for cover. He's got a machine gun there diving. Everybody in the store is hitting the floor, and he arcs out the window past me. Everybody's screaming, and I'm looking out the window. There's a guy who's reaching for the shotgun, backs out of the car, and he turns toward me, hands up, and I'm looking straight down the barrel to his chest. And he looked at me, and he said, please, God, please don't kill me. And I'm saying, if I have to choose, man, I have to choose you. And so I let it all go. All the dreams, all the fight, I can do whatever I want. All I can hear is my brother's voice. We don't get to be great in the real world. Why are you always trying to walk around things instead of just deal with it? And in that moment, all this chaos in my head, I hear it. If you could see what I see every time I look at you, baby, then you would know how great you already were. I think you can accomplish anything you set your mind to, and all you could do, Hassan, is make me a fool for believing such things about you. See, that night I only had two voices in my head to paint a picture counter to the whole world telling me my whole life. But that night I had two voices clear in my head telling me I still had a right to choose. So I took a deep breath and I grabbed that barrel and I turned to Sean, and just for a second became the big brother he fought every day. He took his finger off that trigger and I said, "You lay down, boy, and thank God I'm not the man I was 2 years ago. For what you put me through, you'd never see another sunrise." We peel out of there like the Dukes of Hazzard, burning through the streets with the lights off, hit this little cut, and we sit there for a minute until we finally do that nervous giggle you do when you too tough to cry. Till you convince yourself it really wasn't that serious. And then we found the club. And I walk in and I see my mama, and I go to the bathroom, and I'm looking in this mirror, and I can't see the man she's looking at. That night, I packed up everything I owned in my mama's house. The next morning, I bought a one-way bus ticket back to Berea, Kentucky. Another long ride, 10 hours back. I made the promise that I would never return to her house till I could finally see the man she sees. And it cost me two brothers, my best friends in the world, because they couldn't believe and accept they had a right to be more. What I realized after a while is that the only way I set the example is if I be the example. That if I showed, that maybe other people could believe there was more to their life and possibility. But I don't want to leave you. That's like, dang, dude. So I cannot. So everybody take a deep breath. Inhale, exhale. So I've got a few minutes. I want to share this with you. You might know what this is. Like, I didn't know there was going to be a test today. You might know what that is? Huh? A shimmy, a cloth, a fabric. People are like, ooh, so many options. It could be any of those things. No trick question. This is a piece of cloth. I told you that I toured the country as a performer. When I was doing the Lewis and Clark Bicentennial, I spent almost 3 years on the trail, most of it in the northwest of the nation. Idaho, Oregon, Nebraska, North Dakota, South Dakota, Washington. I'd be on the trail with the national parks telling the story of Lewis and Clark in York. One of the things I do every time I get to a new town, the first thing I do is I'd figure out where Walmart is, because Walmart's open 24 hours a day. And if your brain only shuts off for 3 hours a day, you need some place to hang out where everybody else is doing whatever they do, sleeping or whatever that stuff is. And so I always figure out where Walmart is. I'm in Kamiah, Idaho, at the edge of the Nez Perce Indian Reservation. I'm there for a week of lectures, performances, and talks. And the nearest Walmart is Lewiston, Idaho, an hour and a half drive away. So my routine is this. I get up in the morning, I do lectures, even I do my main stage performance. I drive an hour and a half to Walmart, hang out for a few hours, drive an hour and a half back, sleep for a few hours, do it again. About 3 days into this, I drive to Walmart. I walk in, I'm like, hey, Joe, hey, Frank. I know everybody in Walmart after 3 days, yo, right? And they're like, hey, Hassan. I'm like, yeah. So I'm walking around Walmart, and I walk into the fabric section. You know how you go in the fabric section and be like, oh, my God, I hope nobody's wearing that. But you know they are, right? You know somebody's wearing that, right? I don't do it everywhere I go, but sometimes all you got left is the fabric section. So I go into the fabric section. I'm walking around. I look up. I see a sign that says, discard. The don't nobody want this table. And I walk over, and there's a neatly folded piece of cloth sitting on the discarded table, the most unwanted piece of fabric in the state of Idaho. So I pick it up. And I walk around for the next few hours with this piece of fabric. As I'm about to leave, I'm passing the register, and Joe is looking at me funny. So I got some gum. And we got just showed up for the fabric, right? I'm like, don't judge me, dude. I'll see you tomorrow. But ever since then, the last 15 years, I've carried this with me around the world. And every chance I get, I ask people if they can give me some ideas of things that I could do with this to justify the dollar I spent. So as we finish, I was hoping y'all could give me some ideas, some thoughts. What do you think? We don't all speak at once, though. Ideas? I got the shy group, huh? Come on, give me something. Pillowcase, yeah. Put some stuffing on it, be like, ooh, that feels so good, right? What else? What? A flag, yeah. Teal Nation, right? What else? A cape. Oh, I love capes. Anybody like comic books? I love comics. I have 17,000 comics in my collection. 17,000. My wife says I have an issue. And I'm like, if that's all you got after 30 years, baby, we are good. Let's go with that, right? I learned how to read with comics. Because of this, images are very powerful for me. And so the storyboarding process of comics tell powerful stories to me, and I was able to start to rebuild the words to make the pictures make sense. And so that's how I learned how to read proficiently. But you ever notice with capes, the first thing that happens when somebody puts capes on is their voices change. They start to say words like just because capes make you cool. What else? What? A hanky? Yeah, I'd be like, oh, only one view. Sorry about that. What else? A bandana. Oh, you know I like bandanas, right? Be like, what you say, man? Right? What else? Huh? A what? A shawl. Be like, ooh, baby, it's cold in here. Who turned off the heat? What else? A picnic cloth, right? Be like, ooh, welcome ants, right? Or how about magic carpet, right? Or how about a sling? You ever notice when people's teeth hurt, they tie their head up? I don't know why, but it seems to help. Or right? I mean, it's all about the throw. If you don't do the throw right, you just got a rag around your neck, right? You know? Or you'd be like Fred on Scooby-Doo. It's not a scarf, it's an ascot. Like, go ahead, Fred, right? Tell them what it is, bro. And y'all are really nice. When I do this, like with high schoolers, middle schoolers especially, somebody says something like, diaper! And I always do it like, hey, now what you gonna do? And I'm always like, you know what? I ain't scared of no diaper, right? Come on. But the truth is, this is a plain old piece of cloth I bought at the Walmart store. It cost me $1. Had a young man ask me once, Mr. D, why you waste your money on that ugly thing? We laughed about it. I said, you know, that's a good question. I hadn't thought about it, so I have an answer. Next time I came to visit, I said, you know, I figured it out. When I walked into that Walmart fabric section and saw that discard table, the don't nobody want this table, for a second, just a second, I remember what it's like to be on a table like that, to have somebody decide that there's no more value left, so just whatever. And so I picked it up because I was determined to show the whole world that we wasn't done. This is so much like the young people we serve. So many have been discarded and thrown away. And did you see what happened? We applied our imagination and our creativity. Instead of seeing just what was there, we saw what was possible. Everything changes when we see different what the problem is. And more importantly, when we start to imagine our role and what the success could be. I call this my anything cloth. Because with the proper application of creativity and imagination, there is no limit to what can happen here. And it is just like the young people you serve or will soon serve. Your ability to believe and see what's possible creates the possibility. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe once said that if you treat a man as he is, he will remain as he is. But if you treat a man as he can and should be, he will become as he can and should be. It's about your ability to hope, not just for you, but for those you serve, that better is possible. So, as we close up, I want to thank you. Those of you who are in the profession, those of you going into the profession, the work that you do is the most important work. Not everybody has the courage to hold the line between harm and hope. Not everybody has the courage to step into the fray and say, this is the line you will not cross. Not everybody can make sure there's a possibility that every child has a greater. Your willingness to do that makes you part of the special. We stand for the least. We speak for the lost. We fight for the left behind. And just like you, just like Irma Rosenstein, I am a hope dealer. And I want to thank you for having the courage to step into this fight with us. God bless. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Very, very much. My pleasure.
Thank you very, very much. It was such a powerful story, and it really gives testament to the work that we try to do. And I think, above all, it lets all of us know that when we engage and talk about social problems, those aren't just someone problems, they are everyone problems. And as such, everyone has a role in the solutions to addressing those problems. So very briefly, I think we have just a few minutes. If we can take questions, comments, concerns, celebrations, discussions, we'll do that for a few minutes and then we'll disband.
But don't all speak at once. I told you all about that.
Any questions from Mr. Davis?
Nothing.
So I'll ask one.
Please.
That's all right?
Yeah.
So I think that if you could talk a little more about the power of individual stories and narratives, because I think I kind of like the way that you weave there are these stats, but there's also these powerful stories that we can connect to those and kind of how that plays into the work that we do.
Absolutely. I think story is probably the most powerful thing that we have. Story is, we all have one, right? And our ability to frame it, to show what's possible is amazing. And it's interesting because sometimes when I'm lecturing and I work with students in college who are going to these education, social work, or justice, but my story is nothing like yours, and so I said, and that's actually a powerful place to be, right? If every story was like mine, and my story is not the example of every child that has disability, every black child, every child has been poor, every child has been home, right? I'm not every child, I'm not, right? But it's a story. But if your story is a story of success, of absolute support, the thing that made me most amazed is when I met people who didn't have this experience, I was like, what? People live in the world without this? Cool, I want to live in that world, right? We sit around in college that first year, everybody's talking about what they do at home and things. I started talking, like, yeah, this, and I look up and realize everybody's just looking at me with this horror look on their face. I was like, oh, y'all didn't do that? They was like, no. I was like, cool, I'm going to come visit you at Christmas, right? And so we all have a part to play in this, and your story not being as bad or as mine or anybody else's, that's not part of it. Your story is powerful because you're brave enough to share it, and somebody else gets to connect with it. Someone who may not realize that people do what you do or the way you do it, and so all of a sudden there's a new connection. But I think story is probably the most powerful thing that we have as a gift to each other in community and a way for us to move forward, right? When I know your story and you know mine, when you're brave enough to speak for me and I'm brave enough to speak for you, we have changed everything about the dynamic and the community we live in. And that's a powerful place to be.
Any other questions or comments?
What advice would you give to somebody who's new into social services, specifically working with anybody, at-risk youth or whatever? You're surrounded by some people who've been in the positions for a little bit longer time. It's starting to come a little jaded. Maybe they're
Call it like it is, man. Right. You know what? Yeah, that's a great question. What do you do when you come in enthusiastic about the work and people go, slow your roll, son. We don't do all that work here, right? Because we don't really make any difference. We just collecting a check. Or they say something like, you need to slow down because you're making us like we're not working. But what it is they've lost their focus. And very often, young folk come in, whether you're a teacher, or a youth worker, or a social worker, that is very common. I saw it in my agency all the time. And the advice that I give is, you have, coming out of these institutions, you have the most recent, most up-to-date, most science-focused data about this work. There might be somebody on this job for 20 years, but they don't have the stuff you got. Because 20 years ago, we weren't talking about this. And so your courage to hold with what you've learned and to take it into the work instead of adjusting to do things the way they do it around here is actually a very powerful thing because, one, it allows people who may have disconnected to go, oh, that's what it used to be like to be fired up about this, right? Instead of going to the least common denominator, raise the bar, show and set a standard. And that's the piece that I do, but it's about self-care too, right? You have to make sure as you go into all this work, you don't burn yourself up because there will be people, and great people, who will be more than happy to let you do 8 times the work because you're so excited about it. For real, they will, and they'll encourage you because you're such a good worker with all that new science, go for it. And so don't fall for that. It's about accountability too. And there may come a time when you have been there 3 months and at a staff meeting you got to go, Susie, we need to talk about the fact that you're not stepping up your game. Well, who are you? You just got here. Yeah, but I just got here, but I'm here, right? Team is team. And too often what we have is new people in the field, new workers, because we think we don't have a right to speak up when we see something wrong. You have a responsibility to speak up, right? To set a new standard, set an expectation. Some folk need to go. They've been doing this work long enough, and they put in what they put in. Thank you. Here's your plaque. Roll. Right? Because this work is dynamic and it needs people on the ground active. And we have too many folks that are sitting back waiting for the clock to run out for them. And sometimes they got to go. And sometimes it's got to be you with the new voices to go, hey, I love having coffee with you every day, but that's not our job. Right? And you have to be the one to bring it. Don't dumb down your commitment, your hope and belief in the possibility because somebody tell you, well, you know what, this ain't going to work for those kids, so you need to just go ahead and manage your expectations. Right? We're hope dealers, not hope stealers, not truth tellers, not reality bringers. The whole world is out there to tell folk who they are in real place. Some of us have to imagine who they could be. Maybe that's your job. And if you can do that, maybe some of those old heads will be like, you know what, I remember when I used to be like that. I've actually had people talk to me after and say, you know what, I've got my resignation letter on my desk, but I'm going to tear it up because now I realize why I've been here for 20 years, and I think I got 5 more. You might be the one to inspire somebody to step back into who they came to do this work for and why they came here. Remind them. Don't let them remind you that the world just doesn't work like that. Don't be like my brother. We don't get to be great. Choose to be great.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I think you agree that part of the problem was lack of thought. And this was common up in the black community, and it became a stereotype. Black people don't have fathers, they're real big with their mother. And lately there's been backlash these last 2 or 3 years that the black community is saying, no, many of our men are stepping up. They're good fathers, they're doing the right
Well, I don't know if I can tell you what the truth is, but I can tell you a couple of things. One, my father, and so let me be clear, my birth father, he was that guy. Sometimes you're just not in the right place, right? Divorce, went on, my life struggle. My daddy is the head preacher at the church that he's been at since the day he left us. And he's an amazing man in his community. So sometimes it's about being the right person in the right place. And I don't know what happened there, right? My stepfather, who did step in, right, so was present, right? And he came in and he owned his responsibility to be my father. And I think that's important. I think that when we look at the scope of it, and the data I have is, this ain't a black male problem. This is a male issue. We have fathers stepping off way too often. A lot of that was predicated on the fact that our whole just support system, welfare, TANF, all those things were predicated on a mother being a single mom in a house in order to get the support she needed to take care of her babies. And so a lot of times, daddies were being removed because that's the only way a family could survive, right? And so there are things that the system did to make this happen. This wasn't just, a walk-off on the line. And I do think that now there's a sense in all our communities that there are folk, we got opioid challenges, we got a lot of these challenges that are facing folk, but there are a lot more folks who realize, and even if you ain't in the same house, where there's a responsibility. And I think that's just us as a group of folks finally getting the word out that you don't create and abandon, right? That was acceptable because it divided communities. It allowed communities to be picked apart, and it allowed, there are a lot of other things that create that besides just being folk not wanting to be daddies, right? And so understanding that, we have finally gotten to a point where we're starting to realize and understand that there needs to be, whether you are present and in the same house or not, there needs to be a presence, right? We need role models. We need people, and we need people to step up, and maybe it's uncle. Maybe it's, the garbage man that you see, but there are many, many men who are stepping into communities, realizing their responsibility to be mentors, not just to their children, but to the children around them who may not have fathers, right? And mothers doing the same. We see more moms winding up in jail. We're seeing fathers step up more to own that as single parents, and that was unacceptable back in the day, right? 70% of single moms who have partners in prison have their children. Only 25% of single men who have partners in prison have their children. So the system does that, all right? So understand there's pieces of that are absolutely driven by the system. But I think there's a commitment that I see coming out more of folk to realize that, we dropped off, whatever the reason and whatever the excuse. And I do believe there are more folk who are stepping in to own their responsibility, and more importantly, as mentors, to understand that even if they don't have a child, that to be present in a child's life is important, because that is one of the factors that we know changes outcomes. And so I think that the data and the sensing community has allowed us to transition to that in the last decade easily.
We have time for one more.
Oh, there's huge loss. It's a great question. So I think that there's some intentionality that has to happen on the part of those folk who are asking young people to transition into new worlds. And that intentionality has to be around building community, showing them that there's a place that they can be, right? And it's not about saying you don't need to hang out with those people no more, because that's the quickest way to make sure they're going to go back and hang out with those people. But it's about showing other pro-social connections that they could have and how valuable those could be. It's about creating study groups that are diverse and divergent, about creating opportunities for them to go and engage in theater, to be part of lectures, to see people that look like them and don't look like them doing things that make them sense that this is where I belong, right? And I think for me, that was a huge piece of it. Being at Berea College at first, the sense of it was, oh my God, I'm around here. There's a whole lot of white people here to talk funny, right? But as I sat in that, I realized that the dude named Eric, who talks so funny, always got tongue in his mouth, that's my homeboy, right? He would back me to the wall. But it wasn't until I could get past that barrier of thinking that no way he could be part of me, right? And that's being introduced to a place, right? Being intentionally put into positions and opportunities to know people. That's where we go back to social emotional learning, right? Storytelling and engagement where I actually get to know you, you get to know me, and we get to decide together that there's something in there that connects us besides melanin flow, right? And so I really think that there's intentionality around it, and it's about building relationships and experiences that allow someone to say, yes, that's where I'm from, and I belong here. And that's not easy to do, but that is absolutely the imperative.
So as we close, I want to acknowledge the Rosenstein family, Ann and her husband, for their support of the lecture series. So please join me in giving them a hand. We look forward to continuing to live into the possibilities of the lecture, and we really appreciate the support, and I hope that you see the impact of some of the work that you've been able to do. So thank you very much. And thank you all. I know it is a bit steamy, but it's a good warm afternoon, and so we thank you for coming here to spend time with us today. I hope that you found the story as impactful as I did, and I'm feeling really motivated to go out and to do some different things, and so I hope you all share in that. We have light refreshments out in the atrium, so we'll ask that you shift from here to there. But again, thank you so much for sharing the space with you. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you next year.